Hey my tech friends, thanks for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's continue to grow this channel. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Hey guys, welcome back to the Integral Edition. Let's see if we could fix these issues we found. Okay, so the first thing let's clear up is there seems to be a lot of misinformation on this operating system from a memory utilization, because there's been claims that this has been redone in the later configuration that allowed more than 4 gigs of memory utilization in a 32-bit operating system, just like in some of the servers. So in the older server configurations, you could have more than 4 gigs of memory on server allocated systems, even though they were 32-bit OSs. That's not the case here. So this particular system, if we look, we have 3 gigs of usable memory. There's really 4 gigs, but 3 gigs of usable memory. But if I go into the actual machine itself and go into the virtual machine settings, you can see I have 6 gigs of allocated memory on this, 2 cores of processor, 6 gigs, right? So we clearly don't have 6 gigs. We have 3, which is of 4. So even though, yes, it may have things built into it or options or configuration changes, that's not one of them. So that's just to clear this up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just do the basics, right? So I'm going to shut off System Restore because it's not necessary for Windows XP. I mean, honestly, you can just take a snapshot of it or take a clone of it or back it up, whatever you're going to do. But there's no reason to run System Restore. It's just going to slow stuff down. Automatic updates, they're turned off. Obviously, don't need them turned on anymore. There's no reason for them to be on. We're not going to actually get that. But let's actually take a look at the services console. And let's take a look to make sure that Microsoft Windows Update service is actually disabled. It's interesting, I don't see it. Okay, so it looks like it's actually been stripped. Let's shut off remote assistance. Let's not allow users to connect to this computer remotely. Let's go into performance and adjust this for best performance. I don't care if it looks like Windows 2000. So we don't have these problems anymore, and I don't want to cause fragmentation on my actual hard drives. Let's just make this 4092 on both sets. Click OK. I want background services to have the most memory utilization. All right. Okay. And let's look and see what we have in the MS Config console. Now let's specifically look at our configuration. Let's hide all the Microsoft stuff and see what we got in here. We don't need that running. Don't need that running. Ugh. Startup. What do we got in startup? So what we see in here is the tint setup. We don't need these. So basically what these do is they synchronize your language configuration for Latin character utilization. So I'm not really sure why the heck I would ever need that. So I'm just going to disable those. Next thing we're going to look at here is the .NET Framework 4. If we scroll to the right here, we could actually see this is not .NET Framework. It's just written out as .NET Framework 4. It's a Visual Basic script specifically configured for the slow boot repair. I don't see a reason to actually continue to run this. I would actually prefer to have a slower boot on a system than random scripts running on my machine. So I don't believe that. So based off of this configuration, this is not going to cause any issues one way or another. However, I don't really want it running. I don't want it starting up. So I'm shutting that off. So weirdly, this particular startup command is to use the East Asian keyboard configuration. That would only have existed in the Point of Sale 2009 edition of Windows XP. So I'm assuming that this likely started life as a point of sale system, and then somebody built whatever this is on top of it. It's not necessary to run if you're not going to use this as a point of sale system, so that could go away too. So then that's really it. So the rest of these things are just basic Windows XP stuff. So this is like, so you can hit Alt-Tab to switch between screens and applications. You could have it run or not. Doesn't make any difference. That's something we installed so that way we get a full screen so you could actually see what I'm doing. And then the CTF monitor is just basic Windows XP stuff. Then the rest of this, I mean, for the most part, all looks pretty standard. I don't see any bizarre configurations in the loaders. So what I'm going to do now is just hit close, and it's going to prompt me to restart, and I'm going to reboot the system. Okay, so the system came back up, but it did run a PE in the background and indicated that it made some system changes on system boot. So I think now what we're going to do is we're going to jump back in here and just check our changes. So system restore is still turned off. Automatic updates is still turned off. Computer name, hardware, advanced. Obviously our performance settings are still turned off. Background services still using 4 gigs. Our startup still allowed us to keep those things out. Hide Microsoft. Yep, still turned off there. So that all looks normal. Remote assistance is turned back on. Remote desktop is turned back on. All right, so that means that we're going to have to registry hack this thing in order to get those things to stop functionally asking or requesting or requiring you to actually have them turned on. So let's get into the registry. So let's just start, run, regedit, and let's make those changes. Okay, so interestingly enough, this is missing from the registry completely. So this doesn't do anything. Even though we can uncheck and check this until we're blue in the face, this does absolutely nothing. As to whether or not there's some other hook somewhere in the registry that's enabling that or not enabling that, or I'm not sure, but it's stripped from the actual operating system. However, the remote desktop function is in here. So if we go into HQ local machine, we're going to go into system, and then we're going to go into current control set and then control. And if we scroll down in here, we're looking for remote assistance. It just simply doesn't exist. However, terminal server does. And if we go into fdeny TS connections, we want to set this to 1 and click on OK. That should block this thing's ability to connect. Now, as far as our remote assistance is concerned, because we don't have the actual key, we're going to create one and call it remote assistance. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a new. We're going to do a D word. And we're going to call it F allow to get help. So it's lowercase f, capital A, capital T, capital G, and capital H. So lowercase f, allow to get help. And then that value should stay as 0. So that will disable this regardless of what it says. So I'm not really sure why it was stripped from the operating system. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's a little alarming, the fact that it shows it as being enabled, and then when you go into the registry, it's not in the registry. So where is it enabled from is beyond me. We'll have to run a scan on this thing and get another updated baseline to figure out where we are at this point and find out if any of the changes we did made any change of any kind to the baseline of the issues, the access issues. But before we do that, I'm going to create a new user account and then delete the original built-in admin account. So we already know that the built-in admin account on this, for whatever reason, is borked. I'm not really sure why, but it's not worth screwing around with that because we could just delete it. So if we go into users, there's the admin account. But before we do that, let's try to make a new user. Let's call it like, I don't know. Okay, so we created our new admin account, or a new account anyway. Let's make it a member of the administrators group. Okay, let's remove that, click apply, and okay. All right, so we're just going to delete this account. Yeah, I don't care, it's fine. And then we're going to reboot. And when this comes back up, let's run a scan against it and see if the baseline changes. So this is our original configuration for our integral system that we did the last time. When we ran our vulnerability scan, this is what we saw on the integral system. So we had the 2 critical vulnerabilities, the 1 high, the 3 mediums, the 1 low, and the 29 infos. And if we drill down in here, we started to see things falling apart as far as like SMB access, the man-in-the-middle issue with the ability for people to connect to the system with a man-in-the-middle attack with the null password values of the actual infrastructure. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run another baseline on this configuration and see specifically if with the changes we just made, if this number or this value of kind changes at all. And then we'll continue on the process of trying to lock this thing down to get this number down to just info on the actual scans. Okay, guys, so my scan just finished. And we could see that today, right? 1:58 p.m. And this is from the 19th, which was the last video we did on the integral edition. So this is the out-of-the-box configuration. We had 24 vulnerabilities listed, right? If we go to the fix, we have 20 vulnerabilities. So we did decrease 4. Specifically, which ones we decreased are the Microsoft multiple issues MISC. That's fixed since our change, which is our terminal server encryption issue, and then our null session authentication. And I think the reason why is because we deleted the account, we created the new account, we circumvented the security on the remote assistance, we added those registry keys back, and then we killed off the terminal server through the registry hack. So that got rid of these 2 vulnerabilities, which is a good start. Then the last 2 were we got rid of one of the SMB configuration issues are gone from our scan. And then we also cleared out a single info from one scan to the other. So we've mitigated 4 vulnerabilities in just the changes we've made so far. Let's continue on. Let's see if we can focus on this remote server man-in-the-middle weakness. Let's see if we could get that resolved. Hey guys, sorry about that. I had to step away for a few, so we're going to get back into the video now. But I want to point out something. The more I go through the process here of trying to repair this operating system, the more I discover just a piecemeal attempt of putting multiple OSs together to get an actual product. So we have XP Service Pack 1, XP Service Pack 2, XP Point of Sale Edition, XP Point of Sale Edition 2009 Ready Edition. We have XP Service Pack 3, and they're all clustered together to make whatever this operating system is. And we could see it at all different points. We'll eventually here see in our group policy configuration that we are missing policy configuration that exists in Service Pack 3. We don't have the later ADML or ADMX templates. Parts of the OS are Point of Sale 2009 Ready Edition. Other parts are XP Service Pack 1 Edition. So while we're attempting to secure this, keep in mind that there are parts of the registry that are either missing, misconfigured, or configured for an earlier version that have hooks that are missing into the later versions of the operating system. So even if you do secure this operating system, you still run a risk just because it's likely eventually you'll blue screen when you have something that's attempting to access something that just doesn't exist in this version of whatever this is, XP. Okay guys, so now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into this thing, into group policy, into the group policy management console, and see if we could use group policy to streamline or at least do some additional configuration in the operating system to lock this down so we could get further in our test. Okay, so how are we going to do that? And I think the best way for us to do this is actually to go into our GP editor and specifically go to the security settings, the local policies, and then the security options. And I hit the X. So again, Windows settings, local policies, security options. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of these configurations, and we're going to do a comparison between these configurations and the NIST standard configurations that we have on our other Windows XP machine. Okay, so we now have this portion of our configuration completed, and there were probably about 14 or 15 changes that needed to take place between one operating system and the other. So this is now, we're looking at the integral system. So keep in mind that the settings that you see here should be what you have on your system. They should look exactly the same. The screen ends at the network access name pipes that can be accessed anonymously and starts at administrator account status. And if we scroll down, this is the rest of the screen for your configuration. So just take a screenshot of this and check it against your integral system. Let's move on and go into the user right assignment and make sure that the user right assignment is correct. And then we'll run another scan to see if that makes any difference at all. Okay, so let's look at the user rights assignment here. So just so you know, the configuration that's in here is a little bizarre in the sense that somebody was in here and modified this, but it's modified to lower the security for network access. So for instance, access to the computer from the network, that doesn't exist in even the default out of the box configuration. So I'm not really sure why that's in here. Also, keep in mind that as I'm looking at this, this is actually XP Service Pack 1 as far as the configuration and group policy. It's missing the Service Pack 2 and the Service Pack 3 from regular XP and doesn't have the point of sale XP group policy configuration ADMX or ADML templates in it. So parts of this OS are XP Service Pack 1, parts are 2, parts are 3, parts are point of sale. It's kind of a montage of a variety of different operating systems kind of squished together. So I'll continue to go through this to try to lock this down as best I can to actually remove modifications that exist in here that shouldn't be in here. But before we do that, now I'm just going to kick off that scan. Let's just see what we got. Okay, guys, so I ran the scan against that system that we made the changes to, and I took a look at it, compared it to the original revision. So this is the original revision today at 158. And we could see that we have 20 vulnerabilities. That's after we did the first fix of this video. And then we have 2 critical, 1 high, 1 medium, and 27 infos. And if we dip back into the one that we ran recently, then we see we have 27 infos. We have 1 high and 2 critical. So we did get rid of the medium issue, and that was replaced obviously with info. But the thing that's interesting is we still have this null session authentication for SMB, and we made the change in the registry under the security configurations, or not the registry, I'm sorry, the group policy configurations to actually lock that down, and we rebooted the system. So this should not exist in here, which makes me feel like maybe group policy isn't 100% attached to the actual operating system. So I think what we should do is we should jump back into the XP machine, and we should take a look at the registry to see if that authentication value actually changed when we changed the group policy setting. Okay, guys, so we're back on that XP machine now, back on the integral system. And we could see that host name, right? So that's the integral host name for the system. Interestingly, I opened the registry and I went to the HKey local machine, system, current control set control, the LSA, and underneath the LSA configuration, you'll see something here that says restrict anonymous SAM. And what that is that's that anonymous access into your SMB configuration. And if that's been enabled to restrict the access, the value of that should be 0. But it's not. Its value is 1, which means that our configuration that we have for our group policy is not attached to the actual registry completely through the group policy configuration, which means that likely we'll have to continue on our configuration of doing settings changes in both the registry as well as in the group policy location, because there's no tying between the two systems. So now that we made the change in the registry, let's run another scan against the system and see if that issue goes away. Okay guys, so I ran the scan again, and wouldn't you know it, we still get the error, we still get the notification. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back to the XP machine. I'm going to run a command on the XP machine to try to disable CIFS and SMB1 completely, and then run the scan again and see if that makes a difference. So let's jump back over to the XP system. Okay guys, so I guess now that we're on the XP machine, I'm just going to attempt to run the scconfig command to actually disable the SMB1 configuration and CIFS to see if that makes any difference before I run the scan again. So to save you guys from having to hear me click on my my IBM keyboard here, I figured I would just type it out real quick. You can see it on the screen. Basically at this point, you just hit enter. So we changed the service config. Great. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to actually have to disable this. So to do it, you would just do that and then disabled, and that would allow you to change the configuration to disable it. Obviously, it's not going to work because the service isn't installed because the operating system isn't completely put together. So that's a thing. We'll have to figure out specifically how it's running, since the service that actually controls the SMB1 protocol is running, but for whatever reason isn't named what it is in Windows XP. So I'm not entirely sure what's running to keep this going, but we'll continue on and we'll see if we can still get this to lock down. Okay guys, so I spent a little more time on this and I took a look at the operating system again and tried to figure out specifically what patches were installed by registry keys. And what I found out is that we're missing the WannaCry fix from 2017 that was released for Windows XP. So that particular patch would allow us to modify the SMB configuration for this issue. But without that patch installed, there's really no way for us to modify it so that way we could change the SMB listening configuration of the port for the protocol. So because of that, the only way we could really lock this down at this point would be to use the Windows Firewall to block the specific port with no access or attempt. But the problem with doing that, as explained in previous videos, is if we do it and the Windows Firewall has a problem or loses connection or loses control, or if there's some kind of weird configuration in the firewall itself, we may end up in a situation where that still can't be blocked. But let's take a look and see if we could resolve anything else other than those, the one that we're trying to resolve for the issue. Let's take a look if there's anything else that we can do. And if not, let's jump into the Windows Firewall and start to do the configuration. Okay, so let's jump in and see if we could figure out the firewall situation on this thing. So we're just going to go to Control Panel and then Windows Firewall. And of course we see that it's turned off because why not? The first thing I want to do is actually go into the exceptions list here and figure out what we have as exceptions. So we have network diagnostics for Windows XP. I don't think anybody's going to use diagnostics on this particular type of XP or this particular system, so we're just going to delete that. Yep. Then we have remote assistance. Let's take a look at that path and make sure that that's actually a legit signed application. Because we didn't have that particular service started, so there is no service associated with this any longer. And the tie between the registry and the actual GUI was missing. So I'm really curious if this session manager exists and if it's signed by Microsoft. And it is. That's good news. So bizarrely, that particular session manager version is Windows XP Service Pack 3. So we found some files, I guess, that are Service Pack 3. And that is a legit signed application, so that's good news. And so the only reason I really checked that is because there is a known security issue with this particular file. It's actually known as trojan.hure.rp. It's basically, it's a Trojan virus, a worm, that used to hide itself in this particular executable name. And it was pretty well known back in the mid-2000s. So I just want to make sure that that's not what that is. But that is a legit signed application, so that's good news. Again, I don't know why it's there because it doesn't run, the service isn't installed, it's not tied to the registry, and the OS is disconnected from it, so it's kind of pointless, but whatever. We'll remove this because there's no reason to have it. And then remote desktop, we checked that, so we were listening on port 3389 in any scope. Again, no reason for that. So let's do that. Now let's look at the network configuration. So the first thing I want to do is we want to check the ICMP. So that's allowing ping. We don't want to allow ping, so we're going to make sure that nothing is checked, and it appears that nothing is checked, so that's good news. We're going to jump into the security log. We want to log successful connections and click OK. And then we just want to hit OK. We can check settings to make sure that there's nothing funky in here for our actual configuration, and there's not, so that's good news. So we can just hit OK. All right, so now we have that configured. Let's go back into the firewall. Let's turn it on, and let's not allow exceptions and hit OK. So at that point, our listening port for 445 that we can't control because of whatever shouldn't be visible for the scan any longer. So let's do another scan and see if we've now secured this operating system enough that it makes it look usable. Okay, guys, so now we're on the firewall. Or, I'm sorry, not the firewall, the Nessus scanner after the firewall configuration. And as you can see, with the firewall enabled, we drop down to 5 infos. We don't have anything in here as far as a critical or any other issue. And the reason why is because we did security by obscurity. We blocked the ability for Windows XP to communicate on those bad ports by setting the system to not allow those bad ports to configure. Now, obviously, that's going to cause problems if you're trying to play games because SMB1 is turned off, so you can't use like it as a LAN party. And quite frankly, I would still not use this thing on the internet just because of what's missing from it, which mainly, I mean, even the WannaCry virus patch that Microsoft released isn't on this system. I don't think I would put this on the internet for that reason alone, but, you know, c'est la vie. So what's the verdict here? Is it fixed? No. There's so many different problems in this operating system, I don't actually know where to start. We have problems with the actual OS structure itself, where registry keys are not linked to policy settings. Policy settings aren't linked to registry keys. We have OS configurations in the GUI where checkboxes don't work to the registry. They don't communicate correctly. There's a slew of problems fundamentally with the actual operating system. Now, using it as a game system, if you need specifics that are embedded into the system, maybe it's useful for that. I don't see a point in using it for that because generally speaking, games that were designed for XP work just fine on XP, and games that were designed for a later operating system like Windows 7, you could get Windows 7 to use as a gaming system and virtualize it. You could install it on hardware. So I don't really know the point in this operating system and using it for what, but I'm sure that there is one. If not, it wouldn't be as successful as it's been for the developer to create. Now, with that said, I would leave it at if the developer needs help with this particular system, if he's interested in using a base for his next build that has all the security functions and features built into it already, and then also has the security configurations baked into the actual registry and the policy set, as well as the later ADMX and ADML templates from Windows 10. Have them hit me up in the comments somewhere. I'd be more than happy to drop you the information, the config, or even zip it up and put it somewhere for you so you could grab it. But as it sits with this thing the way it is, it's a great beta. I can't wait to see in a year's time or 2 years' time, as this operating system progresses, what it becomes. It could absolutely be amazing. And hopefully the developer out there continues on it because I could see the potential with it. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching. Take it easy.